Okay. And we are live. I am the brothers Kryn, or at least one of them, and I am joined by the great Maverick. And this time it's going to be more, I think Maverick will take the lead, as Justinian is more his boy. Um, um,
I'm a
but,
fan.
well, when you look at what he built and what he accomplished and what he did, it's hard not to.
Yeah,
Although, I'm just going to say as a disclaimer, I find that the early to mid reign is the golden period, the sweet spot for Justinian.
for sure.
But Justinian's problem is he lived long enough to see his reign decline.
Hmm.
And people today would not agree with this, but I think his greatest enemy was his wife. And what, in my opinion, drops him from an S ruler to an A ruler is Theodora. And that Justinian should have either killed her or divorced her. She would, and I don't think she was a contributing factor to anything good that he did. I actually think she was a problem he should have resolved. She fancied herself Livia. She was instead Agrippina.
He
And
was almost an Olympias kind of character in his life. Um,
yes,
just a real political problem, um, kind of a leech
yeah,
off of his power.
yeah.
But
And
like Philip and Alexander with Olympias, seems like Justinian really loved her and just couldn't get rid of her because of that.
which that's the difference between, I'm actually going to say this, Justinian and Philip. Philip at least could say, all right, I'm done with Olympias. Like, he eventually just dumped her.
Yeah,
He got,
they had a falling out at the end.
yeah, which I'm actually going to say this. I think Philip had a bit more uh, willpower there. You know what I mean? Like a little more
Oh yeah.
vigor to him in a masculine sense. Like, okay,
Hmm.
you're clearly cheating on me. You're treating me like crap, and you're putting weird ideas in my son's head. Get out. Um, but Justinian was very codependent, which
Hmm.
a lot of people would judge me in the modern age, but that's kind of how marriage is supposed to be. You're supposed to be codependent. If you
Hmm.
say, I'm an independent member of this union, you're not actually, you know what I mean? You're not actually fully invested in it.
Yeah.
You've got one leg out the door. You're
Hmm.
either all in or all out. There's no in between. And Justinian was all in, so I can compliment him for that. But he was all in for the wrong woman. And the Italian campaigns falling apart is entirely her fault.
Hmm.
Um, but she was a disaster. And this is where I actually think, how do I put it? Justinian ran his decisions too much past her. And you're entrusting the care of an empire to a woman who is not Livia Drusilla, who is not, you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
a great woman of history in a way. Like she doesn't have the IQ of one. She doesn't
Hmm.
have she has will, but it's all devouring. She's like a black spider, a black widow, devouring everything in front of her. She's an Goliath, basically.
Yeah.
And or Shelob. Actually, I've had a professor call her Shelob, the Shelob of Greece, and I think that's actually apt. But this is this is where I've actually met one person who said Justinian could have been the next Augustus, but he
Hmm.
chose not to be because of Theodora. But had he gotten rid of her, he'd have ascended as an emperor. He'd have transcended his position in history, but he didn't.
Hmm.
So he failed. And he said, this is a clear one of the only like this is one time that's a demarcation point in history where someone chose not to succeed but to fail. But this is what makes Justinian such a great contrast with, say, Charlemagne. Charlemagne did have a woman like that at one point, which the sources rail against. I think it was his second or third wife. It was his third wife. That's right, his third wife. They hated her. What Charlemagne did though was basically told her get back in the kitchen. And he was just like, no, stop,
Yeah.
go. Like he didn't throw her out, but he was like, no, I'm gonna put my foot down. No one is my. He's like, you're a broodmare. You're not actually a co-ruler in this. Which
Hmm.
Charlemagne was just simply a Well, he's a barbarian, so he could get away with that.
Well,
It's.
there's also like a bell curve of female influence over men and politics. You have
Mhm,
like the most barbarous nomad societies. Through necessity, women have a very large role,
mhm,
even if behind the scenes. But then you move into, like, in my opinion, the golden mean. So think like the Roman Republic, early Empire, um,
mhm,
the Gauls, the Germans, that sort of thing, where the men are the clear leaders and the good women are able to influence the men, but the bad women are just, there's no shame in shunning them, putting them away, like, get out of
mm.
here. But then you
Yeah,
go back down the bell curve into a decadent society, and women are then elevated again because of the weakness of men, and
yeah,
therefore the negative qualities of women come out. And
yep,
that's where you get the Theodores. So Justinian is just working within a later stage decadent civilization, while Charlemagne was in the most virile time of his civilization.
yeah, and it would last from until the Hundred Years' War thereabouts.
A good,
Um,
good, what would that be? 700 years?
Let me think. Yeah, thereabouts.
Yeah, they had a good run.
Yep. Then the civilization collapsed completely and
Hmm.
utterly for the second time. The first time was in the ninth century. It collapsed completely and utterly and took
Hmm.
2 centuries to rebuild. Hundred Years' War took about 100 years to just rebuild because things collapsed even harder. And then it would technically collapse again 150 years after that, then collapse the French Revolution. So had about three collapses, France. Anyways, take it away with Justinian's early reign and whatnot,
So, with Justinian's early reign, of course, you have to start with Justin, his predecessor. Um,
who was pretty
and
hard,
I,
pretty cool.
yeah, Justin's story is really good. Um, Justin pretty much came from nothing. He was um, not of the aristocracy, and he enlisted in the military and rose through the ranks. And by the time of Emperor, was it Theodosius? Or let me pull up my notes here.
Let
Um,
me see.
his predecessor, no, his predecessor was Anastasius.
Mm,
When Anastasius died, he was a high-ranking bodyguard of the emperor.
hmm
So when Anastasius died without children, you have, of course, a huge power vacuum and people rushing um, to try to fill his role. And the population of Constantinople was rushing to the hippodrome where new emperors were pronounced. And while that was going on, you had all these high ranking politicians, aristocrats, military leaders vying for power within Constantinople. And Justin was handed a large sack of cash by a high level magistrate to deal out bribes in that magistrate's favor. He did the maybe dishonorable but very intelligent move of using the money for himself and bribing people on his behalf. So he was able, in that very small amount of time, in that critical moment of a power vacuum within Constantinople, get support around him, and he was pronounced emperor in the hippodrome.
Instead of the
Uh,
magistrate,
instead of
which I
whatever that
love.
guy's name was.
I
Yeah,
love
nobody
that.
cares who that guy was.
That should have
But
made him.
Justin,
That should have been made into a movie.
hmm
Um, that's what Christopher Nolan should have adapted, not the Odyssey.
well, either way, he's going to ruin history. So,
Yeah.
speaking of, because of the Odyssey trailer, I showed my wife the movie Troy last night, um,
Ooh,
and she loved it. And I mean,
yeah,
that
it's a
movie's
great
got
movie.
its flaws, but oh, it's so good. They don't make
Yes.
movies like that anymore.
No, Brad Pitt, Eric Bana, perfect casting. And I'll even say they get Paris right. Paris is not some
Yeah,
evil, vile little creature. He's
nope.
a foolish little romantic who, honestly, even Helen is supposed to be this foolish little romantic. And
Hmm.
Agamemnon wanted conquest in the actual story.
Hmm.
And this is what causes the Trojan War. It's not, like Helen's an excuse. The real reason is the wealth, the
Yeah, she
money.
was the Cassius Belly.
Yeah. And Menelaus, though, I think is there for honest reasons. That's where the movie, I
Hmm.
disagree with the movie. He's there for semi-honest reasons, although we have to bear in mind he has a mistress and two kids, maybe three, I think, according to the myths. So he's not really one to talk about, oh, well, how could she leave me? Dude,
Well,
you've
that's
got,
pretty normal. Of it seems like most of
yeah,
history where the woman is expected to be faithful, but the man can do what he wants. And
yeah, good times.
as a
But
Christian, that's very bad. I find that despicable. Um, I don't know if they had those same moral obligations under their native paganism.
uh, not entirely, though we have to bear in mind Hector, Paris, Aeneas are all faithful. So
Yes,
the Trojans abide by those kind of ideas of fidelity. Odysseus tries, but Odysseus gets
he
blackballed.
does.
He gets
He does.
blackmailed by Circe. He gets
Yeah.
he washes ashore to Calypso's island a broken man. So
Hmm.
I don't fully judge him on the Calypso thing. He's just done at that point. He's done
Hmm.
mentally and emotionally. He's broken. Um, which the best adaptation of the Odyssey is the 1997 movie, which by Hallmark. It's moving,
Really,
beautiful.
I never saw it. 97.
Amand Asson, French actor, plays Odysseus.
Okay.
Um,
It's a
but
French movie.
no, it's an English movie. The actor could barely speak English, but he was cast in an English role. But
Okay.
but Telemachus looks exactly like in the paintings.
Hmm.
But the actor brings a lot of young, angry energy and mastered the death glare at the
Hmm.
suitors. But Odysseus's actor, like in this movie, presents the killing of Hector as a wrong action, as Achilles having gone mad, but still treats the character of Achilles with respect. Odysseus
Yeah.
is portrayed very masculine, very like tough guy at the beginning, but like by the time he Calypso's island, he's basically sobbing and breaking down like a baby,
Yeah.
and he's he's just utterly broken. But you have to bear in mind in the Odyssey, he's actually crying on the beach at one point on Calypso's island.
Hmm.
He's just sobbing, and Hermes says, "I came to tell you you got to let him go." But even I'm kind of moved. Like I didn't expect to find the mighty Odysseus crying and sobbing like a woman on the beach. You, you got to let him go. He's going to kill himself at this rate. And
Hmm.
Calypso, of course, you know, doesn't want to because she's lonely. She's a pitiable character herself. She doesn't want to be alone for eternity, but she has to. And yeah, the Odyssey movie portrays it as a very sad, tragic moment, but Odysseus is just intent on getting home. But
Hmm.
the only thing is, they did not include the Argos scene because they felt it was wrong to show a dog dying on screen at the time.
Uh,
Um,
yeah.
which I actually disagree with the decision. Show the scene. It breaks my
It's a,
freaking heart.
it's
But
very, very moving. It's one of the most
yeah,
moving portions of the epic.
but there is a great line to give Odysseus in the movie. Um, it's important to know when to be the right time to be angry at the right person, and to save one's righteous anger for the right
Hmm.
moment. And then later, when they've locked the suitors in with him, he turns to Telemachus and says, "Telemachus, now is the time for now is the right moment for your anger."
Hmm.
And that's when they have Telemachus just start butchering the suitors. like running to one with a spear, running them through, and just
Yeah.
grabbing a sword and just starting to hack at another one. And it's like they gave the majority of the kills to him because it's just like, holy crap. The actor just brings this raw, like he's shrieking with rage and with pleasure as he's basically slaughtering these guys. And it's like, holy crap, dude. but uh, but yeah, it's a great movie. The Troy is a fantastic movie. The best part is Odysseus in there, Sean Bean, who should have been cast in the Odyssey movie, Gods and All and whatnot. Sean
Yeah.
Bean deserved that. Half of Sean Bean's career is him getting robbed of his rightful movies. Um, Lord of the Rings, Troy, he was robbed of each of them.
I
And
think perfect casting for him in both of those, though.
no, not Boromir. He's too
Really?
like it's just he's more charismatic than the Aragorn actor. So
Okay,
when
well,
you're
that's
looking
an
at the
issue with
movie,
me, not an issue with Sean Bean.
but the other thing is Sean Bean auditioned for Aragorn, and he brought physicality. He wanted the role, and I think he would have been better for it. While the Aragorn actor, I don't like. I just don't think he was the right pick for the role, as he prefers anti-heroes and
Well,
conflicted individuals.
I think that comes down more to what Peter Jackson wanted for the character. Because if Peter Jackson's Aragorn was the guy that announces himself as the King of Gondor and the Prancing Pony, like he does in the book, then Sean Bean's the guy. But with the Aragorn that Peter Jackson wanted,
Then
you know, to
Jackson
go
made the wrong choice.
I agree. Character decisions poor.
Yeah, but that's what happens when you're trying to subvert a movie, not adapt a movie, a book. So, but yeah, the Troy is a great movie.
I love Troy.
Sean Bean is perfectly cast. Brad Pitt, I'll actually argue, is perfectly cast.
I agree. I said that too. My wife was disappointed in his acting in that movie. Um, but it does have some weak points, like when Patroclus dies, he's got like the pouty lip, which is a little silly. But I think he did great. I think everyone in that movie did really good.
Yeah, Peter O'Toole, Diane Kruger. Um, like I'll actually argue, Paris really steals quite a few of the scenes he's in.
Mm-hmm.
He does a good job. I forget his name.
Orlando Bloom.
Yeah.
Yeah, Legolas.
Yeah, and also Will Turner. He was in everything back in the day. Good actor.
Kingdom of Heaven as well.
Yeah, very good actor. Whatever happened to him? Why did he drop off? He must have made his
I
money
don't
and
know.
semi-retired.
I mean, good for him. He had huge roles one after another, and then I mean, he was like 20 in the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, and he was like he spent his early 20s working like a draft horse, and then just spent his 30s just. He lived the dream.
He's almost 50 now. I hope he's just enjoying life.
Mm. And then you have Eric Bana got dropped by Hollywood right as his career
He
was,
did. He did. You're right.
which is a crime.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway,
Hector's my favorite hero in the Iliad. So I'm glad Eric
same.
Bana did such a good job as Hector.
Mm,
Yeah. Okay. Back on topic.
yeah. We'll do a separate podcast on Troy later.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that would be awesome. Okay. So not Justinian, Justin was a very good and successful career soldier, and he was known for not being the brightest guy, which is actually okay because he was aware of that as well, and
But he was clever.
he was clever enough to realize that, hey, I can't do this on my own. I know what I'm good at. I know that I can be charming. I know that people like me.
Well, he was
And
clever enough to also steal the bride money and use it for himself.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I'll be honest. Okay, I'll be real quick. I work with a lot of people, interesting people here, very competent people at the school I teach at. But like, I'm probably at least almost twice as intelligent as one female coworker I work with, but she's
Hmm.
freaking clever as a fox.
Yeah.
Um, well, some of it, there is at least one person who's called her Odysseus in drag. She's clever. Sometimes she outfoxes herself and gets herself into a situation we have to then tell her, okay,
Mm,
let us help you out here. But there are people who are more clever than they are smart, and they're
hmm.
fascinating to be around. Justin's one of them. He's clever, not smart.
Yeah.
He, like he must have been. But here's the thing: like this clever person I'm talking about is charming, funny, whatnot. So that's the thing. And it's not just her. There's also one other guy I work with. He's more clever than he is smart. But frick, like being around him is fun. It's just
Hmm.
he's clever and quick witted and charming, but he's just not the brightest guy.
Yeah.
Um, there are people like that, and they're actually pretty fun to be around.
For sure. I consider my mom and one of my sisters like that. One of my groomsmen is like that as well. Um,
Mm,
they're interesting people. They're also usually more capable than the people that are more intelligent than them.
yeah.
They usually got that, like I said, Justin realizes he's not the smartest guy, and that doesn't stop him. He knows how to work around that, and it allows him to achieve more than someone of maybe his IQ otherwise would have. One of the best, well, not one of the best appointment that he made was his nephew, a very Caesar and Octavian pairing with
Mm,
Justinian, or who would become Justinian. His birth name was Flavius Petrus Sabatius. When he adopted him, he gave him the name Justinian, of course, after himself, Justin. And over time, as Justin advanced in age, he was very unfortunate to be struck with maybe dementia, Alzheimer's, something like that. He he was mocked as being a stupid emperor at the end of his life. He made Justinian co-emperor, and probably before he was made co-emperor, Justinian was already running the empire uh, in Justin's stead. Justin did make a very smart move against the Sasanian Persians, who was the omnipresent foe of Rome for a long time. Just the Persians in general, not necessarily the Sasanians. They were both at a pretty low point in their civilizations and trying to come together for a little bit. The Sasanian ruler asked Justin to adopt one of his sons. Justin knew that if he did this, being childless officially, if he died, there would be a possible Persian claimant to the throne, and that would be the end of it. But he still hemmed and hawed his way around the situation to prevent another outbreak of war between the Persians and the
mm.
Byzantines. However, though, Justin, not Justin, Justinian would send raids across the border. I think
As
that
he
was a little
should.
silly. I To me, that's kind of undermining his emperor, but it's still. I mean, you're right. It's a good move in the long term, but in the short term, I see it as a little disobedient.
It is.
And ultimately, the raids led to nothing. You can pretty much always assume in ancient history that these raids and skirmishes are always happening on
Mm,
really any border, unless you're really friendly like Caesar was with the Gauls immediately on his border before the Helvetii migrated south, or like the Carthaginians with the Numidians for a while before the Second Punic War. Sometimes you get those really friendly and uh, agreeable borders, but that's usually not the case.
mm,
Another really good move Justin made was making an agreement with Theodoric, one of my favorite guys, the Ostrogothic king of Italy. That's another very interesting topic. We discussed the Visigoths last time. We didn't
mhm.
get to point in Visigothi history, but they ended up setting up a kingdom in Spain.
Yep.
And the Ostrogoths took over Italy in the wake of the collapse of the Western Empire. And instead of battling them, which Justin was in no position to, he made an agreement with Theodoric to become the ruler of Italy underneath the Byzantine Empire. This was beneficial to Theodoric as well because he now didn't have to contend with the remnants of the empire, and he could rely on his eastern border, the eastern half of the Mediterranean being broadly friendly with him. Now, when Justin dies and Justinian comes into power, he's already been ruling the empire for a while. One before being co-regent with Justin, and then as the official co-regent. Hold on, let me go to my notes here. And his rise was not as, or his ascension to the throne was not as dramatic as Justin's was. Justin and Justinian did do a good job of preventing a secession crisis.
Yeah. Which, it's interesting how the Justin and Charlemagne both share that in common. There was no succession crisis on their ascension. And in Charlemagne's case, he also smoothed out the succession for his sons, or son later, because there's only one that outlived him. Justinian's succession was so darn clean, though, that I could say that most Roman emperors would envy that. Which it's a testament to his intelligence that he had prepared the succession so freaking smoothly and perfectly. Go on.
Yeah, when he came to power, things were pretty good for him. He was an extremely ambitious person. He would go on to have massive building projects, the most famous being the Hagia Sophia, which is still standing today, but in the form of a mosque, which is a huge shame. I forever despise the Turks for doing that.
And we will be eventually, and I'm going to be honest, I do want to eventually present on Ottoman history, as there's a lot of opportunities for presenting that era in Greek history, as it's fascinating and it shaped the modern world in a lot of ways in Eastern Europe. But it's also a funny era in history because the golden age of the Turks was under women, the sultanas, who ruled better than their male counterparts. Which, that's just a fact. They ruled better than their male counterparts. Which is kind of funny. But these sultanas were all Greek and Polish women, so make of that what you will. Greek excellence cannot be diminished by any foreign occupation. As I keep saying on Twitter, and I think I've said it on Substack a few times, there is such a thing as Greek exceptionalism.
There absolutely is.
No? Just as I like to I tend to remind the Greeks, though, there's also French exceptionalism.
That French exceptionalism is one of those basic facts of history that people still like to contend rather vehemently.
Yeah.
Sometimes, for whatever reason, it's hard for a Frenchman to accept that French excellence is just a fact and dominated Western culture for
1,000 years.
Yeah, 1,000 years.
And in some ways, when you come to Europe, you quickly find that we still dominate Europe.
Hmm.
I have to work with a lot of Anglos, and even they tend to say, like, even those who are only coming here for a short trip to visit this boarding school I work at and then go back, they tend to like the it's a center of gravity they have to rotate around. Um, and when you talk to them about politics, a lot of them will mention that England is influenced in a lot of ways. Like the decisions Starmer makes seem like they're mad in the US, but when you come to France, you realize he's having to react, respond, and try to catch up to France and to Macron. So England very much turns around France here. And it's not something I say out of like contempt. I'm just saying England is having to make decisions in response to France and the US. And it's not.
Hmm.
I'll actually extend some compassion to them. It's not easy being in that position where you have two like superpowers and you're kind of caught in the middle. And even Germany, like when I spoke with some German coworkers from my last contract, uh, there's huge chunks of Germany that turn on France. Like they're not. It's something which there's massive amounts of Europe that have to like the decision making process is made by okay, what is France doing right now? What is Macron doing right now? Um, like he's not officially the head of the EU,
Hmm.
but France has enormous pull and power over it, and um, even the Danish decision to start remigration. Um, the Danish prime minister has mentioned she consults a lot of the time with Macron, and she did not want her Danish laws to offend him, which should tell you something about how powerful he is,
Hmm.
and how powerful the nation is when Denmark, which doesn't really share a border, is saying, "Well, I don't want these laws to piss off France," um, which you know. But here in Europe, it's the left wing that's going to be pushing the remigration envelope.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, because Denmark, Germany, Sweden, and France are dominated by left wing parties who now want remigration.
Hmm.
Um,
That's
a
good.
few of them have even adopted the slogan "remigration is inevitable."
Hmm.
Um, it's not the right wing here; it's the left wing that are going to be pushing that stuff forward, which is just weird to me, but I'll take it. But like I said, Macron, France is enormously powerful, and like that's the thing. In Western Europe, France is a major superpower and always has been, and is. But the thing is, the French are humble and they don't generally think about it, um, but they probably should ponder it. Because I've had a few discussions with them, and it's just hard for them to grasp that they are a dominating force in Europe. It's not that they're stupid; it's just that they have a live and let live attitude. Laissez faire
Hmm.
is very much a life model in France. Laissez faire. Um, but when you speak to Europeans coming into France who are from outside it, they tend to say, like, we have to respond to what France is doing. We can't just, we have to react. So that's the thing. Like, French exceptionalism is a thing, just as Greek exceptionalism is. And the Greeks are very much the ones who dominate Eastern Europe for thousands and thousands of years.
Hmm.
Um, like Justinian really does do one thing that uh, I would argue Greece was in a hard spot when he comes to power, kind of in decline, but he makes it so that Eastern Europe turns on the Greek dime. And um, every decision people make has to be done in response to Greece. What will Greece do? What
Hmm.
will the Byzantine Empire do in this moment? And you can't just ignore it. Even like arguably the Merovingian are having to react to what's happening in Justinian's reign
Yep.
and having to cater and pay homage to him. Um, the Carolingian would be a little more independent, same with the Capetian, but the Merovingian are not as strong, so they're having to like send envoys and tribute. And Justinian is quick to, he wants that. legitimizing factor that people are sending him tribute and paying him homage because
Hmm.
it's good for the national ego.
You know, so speaking of national ego, one of his major ambitions was to reunite the East and the West, or not really reunite, more like reforge the
Mhm.
full empire. But he had to play local politics first. Now, one of the biggest hit to his, I don't want to say legitimacy, maybe reputation, was his marriage to Theodora. Before Justin's reign, it was illegal for people of the upper class to marry actresses.
For
It
a
was
reason.
made for good reason, but it was made legal under Justin, probably with a lot of input from Justinian, because he was infatuated with Theodora, who was his mistress at the time.
Mm.
And they were able to get married in 525.
Sad.
Before, yeah, sadly. Well, he probably didn't see it that way, but looking back on it in hindsight, you know, all
Few
these years
marriages have been more disastrous.
later, for society, yeah, few have been, and that makes him a bit of a laughing stock, not just among the aristocracy, but amongst the general population of Constantinople. And that softening of his reputation led to one of the first stains on his reign, which were the Nika riots. Very interestingly, in Constantinople, the local politics were dominated by
Sports
factions
teams.
of charioteers. Yeah, think like soccer clubs, but around chariots. You had
It's
go on, go
like
on.
it's like if okay, I don't know American teams, but like um I'll use a hockey analogy. It's like the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are a bunch of losers. It and the Montreal Canadiens. If Canadian politics really dominated and determined, Canadian and American politics were determined by these sports teams, these two hockey teams.
Hmm.
Um, Naturally, we'll have to say Toronto Maple Leafs are probably aligned with um, the top brass and the greediest, most decadent members of society because, that's pretty true to life. I'm joking. Joking. It's just my dad's team was Montreal Canadiens and the Quebec team before the Quebec
Hmm.
team was dismantled because Canada sucks. And the thing is, the Canadians, well, uh, they like to resolve things with the hockey stick and the fists, their fists, because
Hmm.
they're right and proper that way. But I'm serious, they've got that rep. They're right and proper in that sense. So imagine if politics was determined by these two sports teams, and you're either, let's say, a red, which is to say a Montreal Canadian, or a blue, which is to say a Toronto Maple Leaf. Well,
Hmm.
you know, these teams are going to get ever more rich and powerful and influential. So you're, what was it, the green
Yes,
charioteers, and the oranges, I believe,
the Blues were the other major one at this
the
point.
blues and the greens, and they dominated Constantinople for almost a century at this point.
Yep.
These guys were hugely influential. They were not just simply a sports faction. It was an ideology. It was a political faction. It was a cultural faction. And
Yep.
it's just these guys are everywhere, really.
Hmm. It makes sense when it comes out, and uh, Greek society and the Romans are they have streaks of individualism as well as their good national unity. And when you're under an empire, when you're under a monarch, uh, you don't have a lot of good outlets for the individual to make his voice heard. So instead of the um the people being able to have a more direct role in local politics, these gangs pretty much is what they were around their charioteers are the way they swayed the decisions made within the city itself. Justinian was, in his youth, an ardent supporter of the blues. When he came to power, he attempted to act more neutral, and that
That was
actually
impossible.
it is, and it actually played against him. That actually made the teams unite against him because he wasn't supporting one of them more. But it also made the other ones jealous of the Blues because of Justinian's previous support for them. And it led to a great loss of control over the city itself.
Well, what happened is that he tried to mete out punishment to both sides um, neutrally. And the response from these people was one of rage. And for the first time in history, the Blues and the Greens united. And you got to bear in mind,
Yeah.
this is just, it's okay. Um, I know in American politics, we'll just touch on that lightly, that um, few people want to recognize that the Republican and Democrat Party are actually aligned against the people together. They're openly so. But it's like if they went on the news and openly declared they're a uniparty and that they want to overthrow like they want to not simply overthrow, like, but they want to kill, like the president or let's say, the maybe not the president, but like maybe the head of BlackRock or something. It's utterly unfathomable. How could such a thing happen?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the thing is, these two political factions join forces and agree they despise Justinian. And they burn down a huge chunk of the city while they're
Mm-hmm.
doing it. And it's just,
Yep.
Constantinople is on the cusp of destroying itself. And not one of the enemies of the Greek Empire has to fire a shot, or draw a sword. They're destroying themselves. And they're doing it to a very capable emperor, which is shocking at the time. It was shocking. Nobody knew what to do. And this is the only moment in her entire career where Theodora will actually be of some use in a positive sense. It's the only time she ever stands up for Justinian rather than against him. Um, it's the only time she works with him and for him rather than against him, like she'll make a career out of her entire life. Where she tells him, I just love the line, purple is an imperial color. It's a great shroud for a funeral. And she decides she's staying because he was on a boat ready to leave. And she just says, no, she's not leaving. And Justinian, no offense, but in the modern language, he's a bit of a simp for her. He decides,
Mm-hmm.
okay, if he's staying, I'm staying. You can't bear to leave without her. And he stays, calls in the shock troops, and just tricks the Blues and the Greens into the Hippodrome and butchers them. 30,000 people dead.
Dead.
But
Dead.
I'm actually going to defend the decision and say, you had to. Because, like, how could you not do that? Because these people were insane. They were utterly possessed. They stopped being
He made
people.
at the point of the massacre, it makes sense, but Justinian also made some key mistakes leading
Yeah.
up to that. He had a man named John the Cappadocian working for him,
Oh,
and
yeah.
John the Cappadocian is like the sheriff of Nottingham.
Yeah.
He's abusing his power, collecting
Oh,
way
yeah.
more taxes than he should have been. Was extremely harsh to his political adversaries. He was his actions were grossly overlooked by Justinian.
Mm. Yeah.
And one of the rioters' main they weren't really looking to overthrow Justinian. They really wanted Justinian to get rid of John the Cappadocian.
Yep.
And it wasn't until Justinian refused to do so that things started to get out of hand. The
Mm.
next key mistake that he made was, instead of putting the city on lockdown like emperors in the past had done, he puts on more games. He tries to give them the bread and circus appeal when it was the out of control
Bread and
chariot
circus.
factions, the out of control bread and circus that really put these rioters in the position to riot in the first place. So he doesn't meet the demands, the righteous demands of these factions, and then he exacerbates the problem by giving them even more power and influence by putting on further games, putting on bigger games. He also,
Yeah.
this is where Narcissus really comes into the narrative. He gives Narcissus a big bag of gold. So he calls everyone to the hippodrome, gives Narcissus a big bag of gold to go try to settle the blues, to say, hey, we're actually on your side again. Uh, of course, that doesn't work out, and that leads to the massacre in the hippodrome, where it's really hard to visualize what 30,000 people all dying on like a football field looks like. Um, but dang, dude, that's
He went hard.
he went hard, and he squashed it. The
Yeah,
the
like I said, I think this thing with John the Cappadocian, okay, yeah, they're legitimate problems, but then it's when they started burning down parts of the city that things started to get out of hand.
mm-hmm,
Um, Justinian screwed it up, but it's a case where there are little mistakes made, but they can be smoothed over with time. But people didn't have patience for
yeah,
that.
yeah,
And admittedly, John the Cappadocian did have to go.
mm-hmm,
Yeah, he did have to go. He should have been made an example of because of how greedy and selfish he was.
yeah.
But Justinian is someone who liked his staff. Weirdly enough, he did like his staff.
Well, that's something he definitely inherited. That trait in him inherited from Justin.
Hmm.
He saw how effective having administrative loyalty was under Justin, and how it made up for a lot of deficiencies. Unfortunately for Justinian, his underlings were not him like he was for Justin. They were
No.
they were lesser men, uh, which you would generally expect when it comes to an emperor and his subordinates, but they were significantly lesser than he was. However, though, the in the aftermath of the riots, much of Constantinople was burned to the ground. It gives Justinian a blank canvas to go on his building projects. So he rebuilds Constantinople really in his image, and he rebuilds the Hagia Sophia into what we now know it as. And it really makes you wonder, what are we doing in the modern day when it takes forever just to repave a road, when the Hagia Sophia was built in 5 years? The
Yeah.
most One of the most magnificent churches in history is built in 5 years with their technology. They're
Sticks
able.
and chisels.
What'd you say?
I said basically sticks and chisels.
Mm-hmm. A lot of
But
manual labor, and they throw it up, and it's still standing today. It was pretty much always worked on. It was never like a complete project, but the fact that the structure went up in its form that we have now in 5 years is just amazing. It really goes to show the drive of Justinian and the industry of the Byzantines at this time, even at a relatively low point in their history.
and the thing is, how do I put it? The Here in France, there's cathedrals that are every cathedral is basically constantly being worked on, renovated,
Yeah.
improved upon, and whatnot. And they've even started, I think, building new ones here and there, and new castles here and there, like Gilidon, and they're rebuilding old castles. So when I arrived, I said to Henri, this is what a healthy society looks like.
Hmm.
you're renovating, you're rebuilding, you're building new. This is what a healthy society looks like, and your demographics are good. So this is what it looks like. Canada, it takes like years to get the roads fixed in most places,
Yep.
but it looks like we've been bombed. No, like
Hmm.
right, it looks like we've been bombed into the ground. There's houses in terrible condition in northern Ontario, northern Quebec. Um, northern Quebec looks a lot better though, but still, the roads in northern Quebec are crap. Um, there's actual potholes that are large enough that they look like you've dropped a bomb in it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the thing is, but my problem is when you point that out to a lot of Canadians, they get angry and say, "Oh, come on! No, that's how life is." And it's like,
Hmm.
no, that's not how life is. And I
Same
can
thing in the
actually,
U.S. in a lot of places.
well, when we were under Jean Chrétien, sad to say, we did have decent roads in some places. But no, we left it all to rot. But the thing is, the excuse used is we have harsh winters. But how come we never had road problems 100 years ago, but now we do? Explain that. And they can't. Or the
Hmm.
excuse is, well, they must have had it. But we know they didn't because we have the administrative records in Ottawa and Quebec where they didn't have our problems. So it's just people like in North America today. I find everything looks like it's been bombed, whatnot, and we with our modern technology cannot build anything. We can't build a road that lasts a month. Meanwhile, Justinian's building roads and architecture that'll last millennia,
Hmm.
which it speaks to the resolve and to the good health of the civilization.
Yes.
Uh, Greece, okay, how do I put it? Greece, because here's the thing that people get wrong about the Spangler theories. Um, it's not that, okay, let's take Greek culture. Like it hit a high point under Hellenism with Alexander and his successors, but then it
Hmm.
collapsed around the Third Macedonian Wars, around the time of the Punic
Hmm.
Wars. That was when it fossilized into civilization. It stopped being culture, it turned into civilization. And Greece basically died for a bit.
It
And
did.
Rome basically tried to reinvigorate it. But Greece makes a comeback under Constantine the Great. And we get their culture. You see, just because a civilization or a nation collapses doesn't mean it stays collapsed. It usually picks back up. You can have demographic collapse and all these other problems, but it will pick itself back up.
Hmm.
So this history is cyclical. A country may develop a culture, then develop a civilization, and collapse, then rebuild, then collapse. It's always in a state like this. George Lucas commented this and drew inspiration from Greece and Rome and said they kept falling and rising and falling and rising and
Yep.
falling and rising. And Faust has done this, as I pointed out at the beginning, 3, 4 times. It's
Yep.
interesting because when I speak to a lot of French people here, a lot of them will say, yes, we collapsed in like the last century. The older people are like, we're going to collapse again. The younger people say, no, we're entering a good sweet spot. But the
Hmm.
thing is, if we collapse again, most of the French are like, but we will pick ourselves back up. We'll climb
Yeah.
back up because we've done it so many times.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. The Japanese, when you talk to them, some of the younger Japanese have that attitude as well. It's just when you're a nation long enough, you kind of develop the attitude. All right, we're in a collapse phase. All right, yeah, this time of the year again, we'll collapse, or this time of the millennium again, we'll collapse and pick ourselves back up.
Hmm.
This again. It's like it's a chore. While while in Canada and the US, I find people are fatalistic about it. They're like,
They
no, it's
are.
over. And um, that's the thing. The Greeks at the time of the empire are saying, we're headed up. We're not going down. We're going. And if you
Yep.
look at the history, they were going way up because of
Oh
Justinian.
yeah.
They were
Yep.
going way up. They still had far to ascend after. Well, we had Heraclius, who was just Heraclius. I think it is. What a brilliant emperor. Sorry, there's Alexei Komnenos. Basil II, Basil the Bulgar Slayer.
Mm-hmm.
But he had flaws, But so the Greeks had another like millennium to go.
They did. I mean, almost about 900 years
Mm.
uh, of good, solid Greek culture spreading throughout Eastern Europe before the final fall of Constantinople in 1453, which is like that's a lot of people joke about the burning of the Library of Alexandria as being like a oh it hurts just to think about it. The fall of Constantinople is genuinely
Even
one of those
worse.
things that I think about and like I get pains in my chest when I think about the 1453 fall of Constantinople.
Yeah,
Um,
okay, I get it. You're a
it was
guy. Every guy gets like
yeah,
that.
yeah, I know. It's just like, especially I mentioned my despise, my hatred for the Turks. It comes from that. Just it hurts me. And then that the Greeks wouldn't throw off the Turkish yoke until 1913 is just why did it take so long? Took another 500 years to get rid of them. You said that Greek culture was on a very high trajectory because of Justinian, and you see that in the pace in which he operates in the
Oh,
first and middle part of his reign. The
he's a
Nika
bully.
revolts. Oh, he was so ambitious. The Nika revolts that destroy Constantinople. You'd think for most emperors, okay, they can recover. If they can recover from this, they're spending the rest of their reign settling the capital again. The Nika revolts were in 532. He launches an invasion of Africa in 533. Immediately, he gets his stuff back together, and he
Well,
sends
he basically
military.
says, "Well, that's done.
Yeah,
Moving on."
that's done. All right, move on. Let's keep this
You
train
know,
going.
you know who he reminds me of?
Hmm.
I know it might sound odd, but Ludwig van Beethoven.
Yeah,
It's just
that's
he has
that's
that
an
manic
interesting
energy.
comparison.
Well, it's just Beethoven. It's just when he made Eroica, the Third Symphony, people went, "Oh man, your career's made. Like that's it. You've done it now, Ludwig." And you had Beethoven. What do
Hmm.
you mean? He pretty much said to some of these people, "What do you mean? Well, you made the greatest symphony in history. I'm just getting started."
Hmm.
And immediately launches the fourth,
Yep.
launches these piano concertos that change history,
Yep.
and you just have to run. Okay, well, with the fifth and sixth symphony, they said, okay, now you've changed history. That's it. Like you can't get better than this. And Beethoven's response, of course, was, "I'm just getting started."
Yeah.
And he actually nearly dies, and then he says, "I made such a little contribution to music. I must do more."
Hmm.
And of course, we now know that what Beethoven was hearing in his mind was the Ninth Symphony echoing over and over and over again. But he was manic, and every time he did some great accomplishment that swept over Europe, he moved to the next. Justinian was
Hmm.
like that. It's like, all right, this big event had just happened, move to the next. And it's just always next, 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 with this manic energy that just kept him going, 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 going.
Hmm.
The man must have been someone who could talk like 500 miles a minute, like 500 words a minute,
Oh yeah.
must have just been like, he walks into a room, it must be a ball of energy. And we know Henri d'Anjou, the guy who made the Angevin Empire, he was like that.
Hmm.
Just a manic ball of energy. Charlemagne was like that.
Hmm.
Justinian must have been like that as well, maybe even on steroids, just
Yeah.
like shaking where he's standing.
Yeah, and he's actually personally described as friendly, easy to approach, always trying to strike up conversations with people.
Hmm.
Uh, so professionally and personally, the guy is always on the move, always working something. Always seems to have time to devote to other things than what he's focusing on. So and while all this is going on, the Justinian Code is developing. He's dealing with the riots while he's I guess would it be 532 when the first or 531 maybe? No. I remember my notes. 529 when the first Codex Justinianus is released and adopted across the empire. That's just the
Which
first part of his code, and it
just
develops. through his reign.
Just to remind people, this code, I had to study a law, history of law, still used today.
Mm-hmm.
It is the law code that summarizes, it's the only reason we still know what Augustus's law code was, what the Roman law code was. It assembled everything. And there's a larger codex and a smaller handbook of sorts, a
Mm-hmm.
smaller codex. Justinian collected all the laws, streamlined it, everything. And this sort of legal reform would not be seen again for until the Napoleonic Code of France, like
Well,
on just how big it is.
in
But
the West, around the same time, you have the Visigothic Code, which is not as grand as the Justinian Code, but it brings new law and order to the West. It's not as influential as the Justinian Code is today, but it is a step in the right direction to solidifying the West into the Middle Ages, which immediately followed this period.
and
So,
Justinian, it has to be made clear, his law code is the basis for like the American law, for the French law, but the Napoleonic Code and the Visigothic Code and other codes being drawn into France over the course of several centuries. Um, it's the basis for almost all European law codes. Um,
mhm,
this is perhaps the most important thing that Justinian did in his reign.
yeah, it's the longest lasting for sure.
Mm.
So he launches this invasion of Africa, which you'd think if you're trying to re reforge the Roman Empire, Africa might not be the first thing most people think about, but
But Justinian,
it's the perfect starting place, and it's
mm,
really the endpoint of the Western Empire. So the Vandals were in control of North Africa. The Germanic kingdom under the Vandals of North Africa was formed under Gaiseric, who was king of the Vandals for 50 years. He's one of the great men of late antiquity. He was present at the Vandal crossing of the Rhine, and where they were defeated by the Franks, and his father was killed. And by the time the Vandals migrate through Gaul and get to Spain, he's now the king. They get beat up badly by the Visigoths who were already settled there. And instead of heading back into Gaul, he decides to take his people further south, and they form a large fleet and they hit Roman North Africa. They win a stunning series of victories in Africa, and they defeat two Roman invasions that are launched against them. And this, the loss of Africa, which was the breadbasket of Italy and still the richest province, the richest Roman province, is what really ends the empire in the West.
yep,
So when Justinian decides to launch, I guess this would be the third Roman invasion of Africa. You know, much after Gaiseric, I believe there were five Vandal kings after Gaiseric. They were all lesser men than him, and the kingdom was declining. So Justinian really came in at the perfect time to retake North Africa from the Vandals. And this is where we see Belisarius have his first really great personal victory. He sends Belisarius down into Vandal North Africa, and he beats them very easily. This war only lasted a year. They take North Africa back, and this gives Justinian a huge boost in cash. The He inherited a pretty big treasury from Justin, but the Nika riots and the rebuilding of Constantinople drained the imperial treasury by quite a bit. So he really needed this boost, and also gives him the economic base to continue his expansions. And at that same time, he's adding two more larger parts to the Justinian Code. The Digestum and Institutions are added, and they supersede all the previous laws that had been made in the Byzantine Empire. And this is when, right after the North African conquest, when this becomes like really settled law and will stay in place for, as Joe just said, all the way through, into France, forms the basis of American law.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
And
There's another term for uh, what this law code is. It's called civil law.
mm,
You see, civil law is Roman law, and that's kind of important. Then you have common law, which is English law. The difference is that civil law is based on um, what the Romans, the Roman law code and ideas, even the Greek ones. Common law is basically you make it up on the spot and you find a legal precedent that fits.
hmm
It's why English law got bogged down and just it was a hodgepodge mess that everybody was trying to figure out and nobody could at one point.
hmm
Um, this is also what got King John in so much trouble was he was a lawyer more than he was a soldier. He was trying to smooth it out and figure it out. And the problem is,
hmm
yes, he's like John the Cappadocian, very greedy, but John at least was like his dad. He wanted to make it make sense. And boy, did that piss people off.
hmm
Along with his seducing young maidens and starving people to death for when they pissed him off. So, but when you look at the reigns of later monarchs, a lot of English monarchs, some of them got their heads chopped off or maybe not chopped off, but got murdered for
hmm
trying to figure out the common law. It was like the English present common law as smooth and making sense, but it doesn't. And it just creates one mess after another. But it
Yeah.
does have some logic to it. I'm mocking it. It does have some logic to it. But Justinian's law reforms are just sorry, I nearly cussed. So freaking perfect. So freaking perfect.
And to keep up with this insane pace that Justinian is putting forth, so he defeats the Vandals in 534, gets his law solidified, and then in 535 he launches the Gothic War, which would see hot and cold periods, but that lasts from 535 to 554, dominating the middle and into the latter part of Justinian's reign. This is, funnily enough, the Gothic War is what actually got Joe and I to start a podcast together because we were
Yep.
debating Belisarius. So
Yep.
Belisarius, successful in North Africa, sent again to land in.
Very.
Yeah, he he lands in Sicily and only has pretty minor resistance, and this leads the Ostrogoths to send a kind of a peace delegation to Justinian and cede Sicily, and then get the same deal that Justin had with the Ostrogoths, where they agreed to the overlordship of Justinian. Of course, that wasn't enough for Justinian. He wanted to reforge the Roman Empire, so things stay pretty hot, and things even light up in Illyria. It's pretty it's a pretty near run thing. The Goths are relatively successful. They beat back a Byzantine army and hold on to most of it at this point. They but this leaves Italy open to Belisarius, who marches north through, and he besieges Rome. He besieges Arminium, uh, and some of these sieges are easy. They come through, and the garrison surrender, or the citizens open the gates to them. Some of them are a lot more contentious, but overall, Belisarius is successful in taking most of Italy back. But Italy by this point is pretty depopulated. in comparison to earlier periods. So it's very hard to keep hold of it because there's not a lot. There's not a good
Well,
foundation to hold.
there's some historic theory that says there's some historians who suggest it was not entirely depopulated until Justinian and Belisarius showed up.
Hmm.
That's when the depopulation really starts to kick into overdrive, as they're basically not caring about collateral. Um,
Yeah.
and I abide more by that theory that this
Mm.
is a foreign occupation with no care whether they genocide or starve the population.
Hmm.
Um, and that's what is one of the sources for my dislike of Belisarius. Is just he gives no care for what he's conquering. To him, this is not the ancient homeland of the Romans. It's we that should die, like when it's convenient. It's just no care is given. We'll just conquer and steamroll. But the problem is because um, now the first phase of the war, from 535 to 540, sees the Goths just utterly broken. Like they're
Yeah.
it's when now the problem is not caring about the locals causes the local Italians to start to say, we're better off under the Goths because this doesn't work for us.
Hmm.
Belisarius effectively does something very unexpected. He unites the people of Italy against their brothers, the Greeks,
Hmm.
which that's some incompetency because your job's to unite them with you. You piss them all off. But that's not something he does in a day. Rome's not built and not destroyed in a day. It takes
Yeah.
time. Um, but the Gothic revival also happens under Totila, who pops up on the scene in 541. But part of the problem is also that Justinian is someone who's very wary and terrified of rivals. And Belisarius is looking kind of like a rival. He's getting popular. And Theodora is, of course, whispering in his ear that um, well, Belisarius has plans. And her bestie, who's Belisarius's wife, is also saying, yeah, my husband's not to be trusted. So that doesn't help either.
Yeah.
Poor Belisarius. I know I hate on him there, but like I'm also going to say poor guy. Like, honestly, Justinian should have dumped his wife at this
Well,
point.
the campaign is also one of the biggest drawbacks of Belisarius was, well, it's harsh to put it that way. Not really a drawback of Belisarius, but of the Byzantine operation in Italy, was you had the ego battle between Belisarius and Narcissus, and their sub commanders pretty much refusing to aid each other. And then you have the Persians getting uppity again. So Justinian has to withdraw Narcissus and a large amount of troops to go deal with the Persians, and gave Belisarius supreme command of the theater with not a lot of troops. And the Franks end up trying to come across the River Po, and they end up attacking the Goths, and this creates like a three-way battle
Mhm.
between, or like a rivalry between the Franks, the Goths, and the Byzantines,
Which is funny.
and which is so the Franks come out on top militarily. They smash the Goths. The Byzantines are routed back south, but the Franks suffer a huge plague and are driven back
Yeah.
into their own
And
territory.
we also have to specify the front at this period are caught in a civil war and mismanaged by Malvasians. So
Hmm.
there's no way they could have held on, like, had the battle extended, stretched out. They would have lost. Um,
Yeah.
I may be always gung ho for France, but the Malvasian dynasty is a special kind of perverted creature I despise. So I'm doing a series of lives on them and live streams on Substack, and the French despise the Malvasian, but I will actually say they don't despise them enough. Um,
Hmm.
but the thing is, uh, Justinian, this should not be considered a black mark on Belisarius. or on the Greeks, because I would say it's a victory when your enemy has to withdraw due to plague and
Hmm.
mismanaged.
Yeah, well, I mean, whoever holds the ground is usually the winner.
Yeah,
The
and the
Franks
Greeks
didn't
do.
hold the ground. Yeah. Um, so the after this, the Goths and the Franks attempt to ally themselves against the Byzantines, but because they just fought each other, there's really no trust there. So those attempts fall apart, and Belisarius gets some reinforcements from across the Adriatic, and with these, he's able to move on Ravenna, which was the Ostrogothic capital,
Hmm.
and he's able to take it. And because the Goths could not get a good deal with the Franks, they go to Constantinople, and Justinian gives them pretty good terms because he realizes Belisarius doesn't have either the ability or the resources to really solidify Byzantine control over the whole peninsula. So he gives them pretty lenient terms, even though the Goths themselves were more hurt than the Byzantines were in the theater. Everything
Well,
south of the River Po is now fully Byzantine, and everything north is an Ostrogothic client state of the Byzantines.
and we have to bear in mind another thing. This is a normal phase in war.
Hmm.
Um, the thing is, in the modern age, we think of war just you don't stop. But traditionally, people actually war to hold on to stuff. So this allows them to consolidate,
Hmm.
hold on to it, slowly expand a bit more, consolidate, 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 rebuild resources, manpower, and whatnot, and then expand some more. So I'm actually going to take the stance. Yes, I'm not the biggest fan of Belisarius, but like I'm actually going to defend. Like it's taken. It's not Belisarius's job to consolidate it. It's Justinian's as emperor.
Hmm.
That's what Justinian is doing. So we do have to like Belisarius contract over. He's done. He did what he's supposed to do. So
Yeah.
it's a matter of you need to hold on to what you've got. Um, but although I do have to mention, um, Belisarius, the one biggest mistake he did in his campaigns was he destroyed. I believe it was parts of the Roman aqueduct. Some of them stopped working, but the thing is, Rome would be permanently damaged by these wars and these sieges, and the result was that Rome went from a great city into a devastated one, as
Yep.
people would now pasture their horses and their sheep in the city, like what would happen with
Hmm.
Constantinople after the Fourth Crusade. Um, this is where I'm going to say this was the Greek equivalent of the Fourth Crusade against Rome, and
Yeah.
they it just destroyed Rome. And
Hmm.
this is why Rome, like I forget, I think it was one of the popes who said, "Yeah, sorry, Belisarius, I like you, but I got to actually side with the barbarians
Hmm.
because I'm going to give you you need to get out because this isn't working.
Yeah.
This it's not you, it's us. It's not working out here. So
Yeah.
like the thing is, the Greeks were offended later by the Roman Senate and the Pope going, "Please leave."
Yep.
The
You
thing
know.
is, we have to bear in mind the Senate and the Pope tried to hold on to the Greeks. They liked the Greeks. They wanted to stay on their
Hmm.
side. But when the Greeks are demolishing parts of the city to better, like they're doing that in order to better hold off against the enemy, better hold off
Yes.
against the
As
enemy.
military actions.
Yeah, and the problem is this is damaging key architecture and structures in engineering. And the people of the city are saying, "Listen, we like you, but you're killing us. You're
Hmm.
literally murdering us to kill your enemy. We actually can't stay on your side. Sorry, we like you, but we can't stay with you." And Justinian is this is the thing. Rome pisses off the Greek Empire because they feel it's a betrayal by Rome. But Rome doesn't have a choice. They don't want to
Hmm.
make the decision because they want us to be part of the empire, but they can't be part of the empire.
Yep.
So this is one of those problems that these Gothic wars face. Um, And the other trouble is you have insufficient garrisons, heavy taxation, and the charismatic Totila, as mentioned, gets elected king because the Goths need a new king,
Hmm.
and he revitalizes his Gothic forces and adopts new tactics. And he decides to try to win over the Italians, which, like his policy of appeasement really does uh, help. Now, we have to bear in mind by 550, Rome is almost utterly depopulated and ruined.
Hmm.
But in 544, Belisarius is back. But he's not back with the adequate resources he needs and only achieves a few minor defensive successes.
Yes.
He can't quite reverse the tide. Although I will criticize also that with less resources, Agrippa did more. So maybe we're giving excuses here when we say insufficient resources. Maybe we should actually say you were given some resources. That's more than, say, Agrippa had at one point. That's more
Hmm.
than Charlemagne had. You have more than a lot of other people had, but you achieved less. So maybe we're propping you up too much. So I'm going to be harsh on him and say, I'm going to hold him to the same standard I hold like Napoleon and others and say he should have accomplished more, but that he didn't shows he didn't have it in him to accomplish more.
Hmm.
And I know that's a harsh stance, but I feel we do need to be harsh here because um, I'm going to actually say Narcissus had less to an extent and accomplished more.
Well,
So
in the first campaign, uh, Narcissus did have less resources than Belisarius did, and before Belisarius was recalled, the Goths offered to make Belisarius a new Western emperor,
yeah, which is
and
insane.
it is well, he defeated them in several battles and sieges, and that's how you win a Germanic barbarian's heart is defeating them in battle.
Kind of like
They
a
offered.
oh, I should not make a comment. Kind of like certain women I have known, where you just need to beat them enough, and then they want you. I've
Let's not
never
get
done
into
that,
that.
but actually, I've I've never done that. But I have an ex who's like that with one of her exes that she
Oh,
kept
that's
going
so
back to. He
funny.
kept beating the shit out of her, and
Yeah.
it's just you can't fix stupid. That's the thing,
Hmm.
and it's
So
just
because of that incident, I do know that there are some historians who believe that Justinian recalled Belisarius after that agreement was made out of distrust, possibly out of jealousy for his successes on the battlefield. And I think there is some merit to that point because Belisarius was not given a triumph, which many Romans had been given triumphs for lesser victories than pretty
he should
much
have
the
given him a try.
reconquest of Italy. He should have been. Um, he, I do think he had it in him to defeat the Goths only because the Goths were so weakened. But like we said before, Belisarius, not Belisarius, Justinian had to worry about the Persians,
Hmm.
so he really wanted to get Belisarius out of there and get a peace. And this agreement was very reminiscent of um, earlier fettered agreements that we talked about in the last episode. So by making northern Italy an Ostrogothic client state, allowed Justinian to bring a lot of Goths back into the imperial army, and they were
Hmm.
sent over to the east to battle the Persians for him to keep them at bay for the time being. But when Belisarius left Italy, it was in complete either direct or indirect control of the Byzantines. So job was done. He was withdrawn possibly prematurely, but that's because of circumstances outside of his theater. So, like like you started, we get to Totila, and Totila really had his plate set before him because the plague of Justinian was was just
Also raging
raging
around.
through the Eastern Empire.
And it was
Um,
brought into Italy by the Greek soldiers, not their fault.
no,
And
I
so
mean
it's sweeping
that's just
them
how
off.
plagues work.
Yeah, and it's swept across Italy, and Rome is poor Rome, just utterly
Hmm.
demolished. First by war, famine, and now plague, and then more famine. So, but at the same time, I do think let's give Totila some credit. He is a great man of history.
Hmm.
He rises to the occasion. He conducts a brilliant campaign, reforms the Gothic army. He takes city after city after city with Caesarian level magnanimity, and he just
Hmm.
he does not make one mistake.
Yeah,
Um,
he had a very good run.
yeah. So I'm just saying, let's also give Totila some credit. I like Totila; he's my boy.
Hmm.
But at the same time, um, now what Justinian does is he decides to make Italy a Byzantine province under the Pragmatic Sanction. He restores Roman law, administration, and land to previous owners where possible.
Hmm.
But like this is freaking hard. He does that in 554,
Hmm.
and um, but like the thing is, um, the, Justinian is faced with crisis after crisis at this point. It's just things are just not going well near the end, and we can't entirely judge him because he did his job. But the thing
Hmm.
is, Belisarius dies, so he doesn't have Belisarius to turn to. Um, he he loses Theodora, thankfully, so she's no longer plaguing his reign. Um, and of course, he ends up having well. But the thing is, in Italy, things are so broken down and weakened that people do not want Byzantine rule anymore.
Hmm.
And we have to understand that when Belisarius shows up, people want him. They want Greece. But by the end of these Gothic wars, they've been so mismanaged. I'm not just blaming one person, I'm blaming like everyone. Corruption, taxation, plague, and so that people, the survivors, basically just look at this and go, "We're better off before they showed up. We really don't want
Hmm.
to be part of this empire." And when the Lombards show up 3 years after Justinian's death, their reaction is one of, "Sure, let's try the barbarians again.
Yeah.
Let's try the
Hmm.
Lombards. They can't be worse than this empire." And I'm actually going to criticize one thing about the Byzantines. They it up, and they don't do themselves any favors in the next few centuries by treating the Italians like the enemy, and they do treat them
Hmm.
like the enemy. And the thing is, by the time the Normans come in, the Normands leave at the turn of the millennium, thereabouts, like after the First Crusade. Oh, no, wait, before the First Crusade and in the lead up to the First Crusade. And the thing is, the Italians generally welcome the Normans because, in the Greek provinces, because they just see it as, we really don't like this arrangement. And the problem with that is that if what basically amounts to bandits, Normans are bandits are more popular than the imperial rule, how
Hmm.
heavy is the yoke? And this is the problem I'll actually ascribe to kind of Justinian and Cappadocian and others, is that they should bring the Italians on side onto the empire, but they don't know that this is what they're supposed to do. So they alienate the Italians.
Hmm.
You're not, like you can't run Italy if as a foreign occupant because the Italians are just going to get pissed off. Nowhere in the history of the world has ruling over people um, as an empire nowhere in history has it been a good idea to piss off the locals.
Yes.
Um, because they'll just rebel and rebel and rebel, and you're just going to keep pissing them off.
Hmm.
Um, this is why Roman rule was so effective. It's because it was, yes, heavy at first, but then people liked it. The Romans brought you on side; they made you like it.
Hmm.
The Greeks are exceptional, but what the Greek Empire fails to do in Italy and the West is bring people on side. By treating them as inferior, they pissed them off, and they opened the floodgates for the barbarians to come in pouring in. again.
Mhm.
So this is Justinian's big mistake. He sets up a standard that this is how you rule. And that's a mistake. It's just an out and out mistake.
Mhm.
And that being said, um, now I know a lot of people take offense at my uh, harshness towards Greek rule in Italy, but I don't think there's any other way to look at it than a complete and unmitigated disaster. Um, the administration is not well set up. And the other problem is that this is the homeland of the Romans. So by making it the enemy in a way, like you know what I mean, like let's overtax them, let's piss them off, let's treat them as inferior, as third class. These are the original Romans. You're
Mhm.
pissing them off. It's kind of not very nice, so to speak. And um, you basically impoverished yourself to get it, and then you're just gonna. The problem is the mentality is that well, I want my money's worth. But if it's just about money, then that's all you regard those people as a source of revenue.
Follow.
You know? Yeah, it's just gonna piss people off and enrage them, and it's gonna alienate rather than bring on board. That being said, um, Justinian does rule well. Let's be honest, he rules well. The standard of living in Greece must be mentioned. It is very high in this period, which is something because the living standards elsewhere has collapsed. You look at
Yeah.
Francia, you look at um, Italy, you look at Germania, you look at England. Oh boy, it has collapsed.
Mhm.
The only two places where it's kind of stayed pretty good is Visigothic Spain and Greece. These are the two sweet spots in the world. Um, Let me think about Asia. Well, China's collapsed because of the idiotic policy of bringing barbarians in to colonize the frontiers. Well, uh, to colonize China for its internal civil wars. Um, Korea is still in a civil war, 1,000 long civil war period.
Mhm.
Um, Japan is well, it's still in its Mound King period. So it's not. No, wait, they're entering their religious wars. That's right, they're entering their religious wars. They have almost 150 years of religious conflict, just tearing them apart and ripping them to shreds. So, yeah, Greece and Visigothic Spain is where you'd want to live in this era. You wouldn't
Yeah.
want to live anywhere else.
No. Well, this is also an era of immense Persian decline. Their wars with the Byzantines drained them to the point of being easily defeated by the Arabs. The Byzantine reconquest of North Africa also weakened North Africa to being conquered by the Arabs. So to sum up the reign of Justinian, he he was extremely ambitious. He had a very extreme vision for what he wanted his empire to be. And unfortunately, this was obviously not his intention. He strengthened what we now know as the Byzantine Empire, but for them it was just the Roman Empire. He strengthened the Byzantine Empire at the expense of the West. He gutted North Africa. His wars and policies gutted Italy. His failure to really make a peace with the Persians is what led to the ultimate fall of the Byzantines 900 years later to the Turks. Um, I really, I'm a fan of the Justinian era because I find it extremely interesting. The back and forth Gothic wars being a high point of interest for me.
Hmm.
The internal politics in Constantinople are extremely interesting. Same with the battles against the Persians.
But there were
But
disasters.
there were it was some disasters in his reign and unfortunately, a lot of his actions would lead to future disasters for Western civilization. It led
Mm.
to the golden age of Islam, the you know what we would call the Dark Ages in Western Europe, and it took Europe about 500
Centuries.
years to really come back from the Justinian era, and it would take Italy about 1,000 years to really recover from the Gothic War. It
Yeah,
wasn't until the 16th century when Italy started to make a comeback.
which is horrifying to think about.
It is to think that Italy itself had a real bull run from the Pyrrhic Wars between the Roman Republic and Piers of Epirus to really Ostrogothic Italy, which was Ostrogothic Italy was a pretty decent kingdom for the
Mm.
era.
Although it must be mentioned that southern Italy will get a revival under the a brief revival under the Hauteville family,
Hmm.
who would for about 3, 4 generations be a series of great men of history who would commit themselves body and soul to the revival of southern Italy. So southern Italy is going to get a revival around the 12th century, and
Hmm.
it's going to last for about 150 years thereabouts. Then Friedrich Stupermundi will rise to the imperial throne in Germany, and after him, Italy just collapses again. Um, it returns to its default state of collapse until, as you mentioned, the 16th century. Um, whereas with, um, just to pick at the other nations, Germany isn't really going to be formed until the 10th century, really, as we understand it today, as
Hmm.
the Holy Roman Empire in 923, I believe, AD. Um, Francia will collapse and collapse and collapse, try to rebuild. Charles Martel will defend it, but he can't just revive it in under a day. Pépin de Bref will go a long way to consolidating and empowering it. So, like from Charles Martel through to Louis Le Pire, you've got a golden period. I say golden, but like got a great period, a revival really. But then it collapses because of Louis' sons who are not their father,
Hmm.
and from there, Francia will collapse for about 2.5 centuries thereabouts, and then she'll start to revive, and then you know but history is cyclical. We know that now. It's not a straight line. It's cyclical. It's always a
Hmm.
cycle. Which is actually what someone complimented my Crown of Blood book recently about. A.M. Blackmere. I'll give him a
Oh,
shout out.
nice.
Yeah, he said, "Oh wow, these guys really understand history. It's just the cycles of it." And it's like, "Oh, thank you. That's very nice of you to say."
Hmm.
Because that's the goal with when you write fantasy of that sort. You need to capture the elements of history that make history what it is. It's not something that's like that is a straight line, and that's
Hmm.
something that um, how do I put it? Certain authors tend to treat it like a straight line, and that's why the history doesn't feel real or proper or Tolkienian or Howardian. When you look at this period of Greek history and Roman history, it's very similar to the collapse after Alexander's successors. You know what I mean? It's very
Hmm.
similar to the Hellenic collapse, except it's the collapse is in Italy, and it's just arguably Italy enters a dark age. Um, it's going to be dominated by Germany and Greece
Hmm.
um, for the next almost 1,000 years, except for a brief period, as I mentioned, but with Sicily just rising to the top in southern Italy. Then Germany takes over, and then just everything collapses.
Yeah.
While in Spain, Visigothic Spain will be going good till it starts to collapse a little. Then Islam just destroys it,
Yeah.
and nothing will be rebuilt until Reconquista.
Yep.
Because The Moors are not able to build. Um, they're not. They're not the Spaniards or the Portuguese. Um, they're not. Fundamentally, they are not. And if you look at Scandinavia, it's going to be entering its Viking phase after Charlemagne, and that's
That's
nothing will
like
be.
200 years after this period that we're talking about.
Yeah, so this period has massive repercussions.
Hmm.
Um, and Greece will continue going on. Now, the Justinian dynasty will be overthrown in time, replaced. That will be replaced and whatnot. And Greece is going to be entering an interesting period in the 8th century, thereabouts. Um, very rich, very important uh, period, which transitions it from the Justinian period into its next phase.
Hmm.
And meanwhile, the Merovingians, who had paid homage to Justinian, who were such dutiful, I don't want to say subjects, but because they're not really subjects, they're not vassals, but they're tributaries. We'll use that term. It's appropriate. Such
Hmm.
important tributaries and such dutiful tributaries become les rois feignants, that is to say, the imbecilic kings who are brought out on a ox cart at the back of it and
Yeah.
just to wave at the crowds and pass gold around. That's literally what these kings were doing, while the mayors of the palace are running the
Yep.
show. But we'll get more into that next time because we'll be examining Charlemagne. But before we get to Charlemagne, we got to examine like what created him in a way. Well, I know it's God, but like what I mean is like what led to him, I should
Uh-huh.
say. But like what planted the seeds for the rise of arguably the greatest European ruler since Augustus.
Hmm.
Um, and now, as a ruler, how would you rank Justinian? I'd say he's at least A list, maybe like in hindsight, I'm tempted to almost say B. So I'm going to say like I know we shouldn't say it, but maybe an A minus.
So I know a lot of people want to put him in S because he's one of the few Byzantine emperors that people can like, just think of off the top of their head. That if you know a Byzantine emperor, it's Justinian. Clearly, though, if you look into his reign, he's not an S. Um, if if he was and if his reign was of average length, if it was like 10 years, he would probably be a solid A. But
Hmm,
because it goes on for so long, I believe almost 40 years,
it
um,
does.
the decline after the Gothic Wars really tarnish his reputation, in my opinion,
Hmm,
and the ramifications, especially for the West, after his rule, I would say lower him to B tier. However,
hmm.
though,
That's
if
fair.
we're ranking him against his contemporaries, he's clearly an A. He's
Yeah,
solidly an A for the 6th century. But
yeah, and
in
I'm
the
like,
grand scope of Western history, I think he's a B.
yeah, I might rank lower him to a B as well. Now I think about it, because there's Rome. I'm not
Hmm.
trying to over compliment it, but this is one of the most important cities in the empire, and you smashed it to hell. Like
Yep.
it's not the barbarians that did it. That's him.
Well, Totila even bypassed Rome
Yeah,
in his march south through Italy.
yeah.
It was the Byzantines doing that smashed Rome, and
Hmm.
really really truly put Italy into its own dark age that lasted a
Yeah,
thousand years.
yeah. So the destruction, the total annihilation of Italy, and the taxation of the region, like such heavy taxation, which is insane because you just destroyed the place. You can't just tax it. Well, I want my money's worth.
Yep.
Who are you, John Hammond from Jurassic Park? No, you're not going to get your money's worth. You need to be patient. You need to consolidate. You need to sweeten the pill. You just
Yep.
butchered everyone there. The survivors are not going to be happy,
Hmm.
but somehow he thinks he can get away with it, which is foolish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He definitely had an eye for the future, but only in vanity projects, like in his building projects in Constantinople.
Which he
He
does
was
merit the
more
phrase. Solomon, I have surpassed you.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
deserves it.
Um, but he was not an empire builder. He tried.
Mhm.
Uh, his attempt was very hollow. He was really looking for short. His All of his decisions really were short term gain, long term loss,
And
and it shows in his dynasty. His dynasty doesn't even last 100 years after him.
and
You
what's
have
more is, oh, sorry for interrupting.
I was going to say his reign was very long, but then he
Mm,
is succeeded by um, a series of very short-lived emperors, and the Heraclean dynasty takes over, like I said, less than 100 years
and
after Justinian's gone.
it's like Justinian was LARPing as Augustus,
Yeah,
with Belisarius as his Agrippa. But the problem is, Belisarius is not as brilliant as Agrippa.
mm-mm,
He's not that. I'll actually say this: Agrippa's like this giant in history. He's this monumental builder, scientist, engineer, political. Even he's even a political mastermind,
mm-hmm.
military master, administrator, whatnot. He's a juggernaut. Augustus is even greater. But it's like these two are LARPing as the two without fundamentally understanding what made those two great
Yeah,
on some level. And because when Agrippa takes over Greece in the east, him and Augustus are not out to burn the place to the ground. You know what I mean? They're trying to avoid casualties. They want to take it intact. They don't want to destroy anything. And they succeed in taking it intact.
mm-hmm.
And Justinian doesn't have this awareness, but that's what's so fascinating. And as we'll see, the great man of destiny of the post Roman period is not going to be Justinian. The great builder, the great man of destiny, as I like to call him, is going to be Charlemagne, who is really like the ultimate Ubermenschen, like the ultimate uh, ruler. I'm a Charlemagne fanboy. He's my
Oh, me
boy.
too.
Oh man, he never made one mistake in his reign. I will actually say that. I will like people say, "Oh, you're gushing." Yes, I am. Um, but the thing is, I've had people say, "Oh, he wasn't that great." No, he was greater.
No, that's absurd. Yeah,
Yeah, I even have the opinion if you took him to war and put him against Caesar, I think Charlemagne would win. I hold that him in that higher regard because he's
mm-hmm.
just that dominating factor. He like Caesar was great, but Charlemagne was greater, and
Mm-hmm.
Charlemagne just has such an eye for logistics and for geography and terrain that it's just he he turns he kind of turns the Alps not into his weak because the Alps are the weak point in Hannibal's campaign in Italy. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
he loses a good chunk of his army getting in. Charlemagne turns the Alps and the Italy. No, it's the Rorschach meme. Uh, it's not me who's trapped in here with you. You're trapped in here with me,
Yeah,
kind of thing. He turns the
yeah,
Italy into his slaughterhouse for his enemies. So, like, that's the thing. The contrast could not be greater. But Charlemagne will combine all the virtues and greatness and incredible talents of Agrippa and Augustus in one great package. A 6 foot, what is it? 6'4" or 6'6" package.
yeah. Huge
It
guy.
is, yeah. Anyways, we'll stop here because we're almost getting into the next episode.
Yes.
So I'm going to promote Maverick as always, and remind people to subscribe to him. He only has 64 subs. How on this
It
planet is that possible or allowed?
You know, I it's because of me. I don't post enough. Every time I post, I get a good burst of subs. Like, I mean, for me, five at a time is a lot. I'm under 100. Um,
We'll get you
if
to
I just
100.
keep posting, I'll get there. I'll get there.
We'll get you there before the end of the year.
Hmm.
So I will remind people check out this podcast, please, for the love of everything sacred. Check it out. It really is a great Substack. Maverick has a great eye for history. He's better at the Justinian period, as shown, than I am, and his eye for the Gothic Wars and the Gothic um, histories is unmatched. So check them out anytime. And next time we will be starting episode 1 because, like Shadow Man, you can't cover him in just one
No,
episode.
not just one.
Yeah, it's going to be like probably half a dozen episodes just on him. It's just you want to talk about a giant of history. He's a
Hmm.
titan. We will be discussing the second David next time, and we'll see you all later.